Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video review. This time we review the new Meike 50 f/0.95 for APS-C camera. As always, I will review the Fujifilm X-mount version. This is a new lens from Meike, and these are the specifications on the box. I will put a link in the description to the official webpage so you can check our specification. And this is the lens mounted on the Fujifilm X-3. As you can see, the lens is not quite big, is good also mounted on small cameras, and the front cap has a good fit, not like the fisheye. And you can notice the huge lens front element and the nice aperture blades of this lens. Very smooth and round aperture. The aperture ring is clickless. I would prefer to have clicks since I'm not a video maker, but I could agree for videos is the best choice. It's very smooth, has a good range, as you can see, and also the focus ring is very smooth too. I would prefer a little bit wider range to focus, since this lens is very hard to focus if you use it at a full aperture or even at 1.4. You need a very precise focus on the subject. If we want to compare with the original Fujifilm 56-1.4, the lenses are quite similar on size and weight. Both has a 62 millimeters front filter size, and the Fujifilm is a little bit longer, not so much, a tiny bit longer, as you can see. Okay, let's go to check some picture samples. This sample is at 0.95, so full aperture, and you can see a tiny bit of swirl on the bokeh, like some old Carl Zeiss Jena lenses, and also the contrast is low. You can see the haze on the highlights. It gives a kind of feeling of the old Leica screw mount, the Tambar famous lens for portraits. About chromatic aberration, there's a lot, to be honest, especially here around the edges on contrasted situation, like the black and white here. You can see a little bit of green chromatic aberration, especially if you edit the image. And right there you can see a lot of purple fringe. Let's go to 1.4. You can already see the difference. Let's check again with 100% here and here. The contrast right now is pretty good. Also the sharpness. This lens, I must admit, is pretty sharp, even at full aperture, when you perfectly match the focus on your subject. Chromatic aberration is still visible, especially purple fringe, and here the green chromatic aberration is already nearly gone. There's a tiny bit. If we go to f2, you can clearly see the chromatic aberration and the purple fringe is going to disappear, and the overall contrast and sharpness image is pretty good already at f2. 2.8, even better. And also here the chromatic aberrations. The purple fringe is just a tiny bit visible. f4 is starting nearly to disappear, a chromatic aberration. Sharpness is a little better, also contrast. f.6, purple fringe is already gone here. There's just a tiny bit here, but I think you cannot notice if you don't over-edit your image. And at f8 there's no chromatic aberration at all, and the sharpness is still and the contrast are still very good. There's no diffraction. At f11 and f16 we can see a tiny bit of diffraction, and this is quite normal for the APS-C format camera. Normally f8 is the higher limit you can close down a lens, and if we go back to the full aperture you can easily see the change on the depth of field and the kind of bokeh this lens is able to give. 5.6, f4, 2.8 to 1.4, 0.95. So in my opinion, these are good results for this kind of high-speed lens. Let's check the sun rendering. This is f4. We already have a nice sun rendering, f4, and f8 even better. I really like the sun rendering, and also the ability to manage a high contrast situation even in direct sunlight. The only downside of this lens is this one. You can clearly see here with a lens flare, and another example here, even worse, and here too. The aperture was 1.4 f2 if I remember correctly, and the sun was here on this direction. It was around 3 or 4 p.m. so the sun was still quite high since we are in the summer. In my opinion, if you like to shoot during sunlight, it's better to buy a lens hood, and there are many in rubber or metal. Even at second hand you can put on the filter thread of this lens, and so you can easily avoid this kind of sun flares. Here's a quick comparison video between the Meike 50-095 and the Fujifilm 56 1.4. You can see the difference between the apertures as bokeh, depth of field, and overall sharpness and quality. And as bonus, I took some pictures in infrared with my XE3 full spectrum, and I used a 093 B&W filter, especially for black and white infrared. I just added black and white contrast on capture 1, just to have a little bit of contrast. At full aperture, as invisible light, this lens lacks some contrast. Sharpness is already good. Here I miss a tiny bit the focus. The focus is here. As on the visible light example, this lens has better contrast and better sharpness as you close down the lens until f8, and at 11-16 is a tiny bit too much stop and down in my opinion. I think this lens will work nicely in infrared too. I didn't notice any hot spots, but as you know, it may depend on your sensor, filter, and so on for infrared. At the end, I like this kind of lenses. Lenses that have some kind of character, vintage vibe of some situation, like the swirl on the bokeh, like the hazy at full aperture, like the old timber. Yes, you can have a lot of sharpen and contrast closing down at f8, but personally I will never buy a lens with such a wide aperture to stop it down to f8, or I will stop down if I really need it. I prefer to use it at 1.4 f2, rarely at 2.8, to let this lens give the best on the bokeh and that hazy, low contrast feeling. It's a very good lens for night shots, as you can see. It is probably a wonderful lens for portraits. Sorry, but I don't do portraits, but you can understand on looking at the pictures how good can it be, especially if you use it wide open. Be very careful on focusing. It's really easy to miss the focus point even at 1.4 sometimes, because as I already mentioned, the focus ring is a little bit too fast in my opinion. I would prefer a wider range of rotation to a better focusing. But let's say if I would do a night trip, I would take this lens for sure. I really enjoyed and I hope to use it again in the future. As always, thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you like it. Please subscribe to my channel and see you soon. Bye bye.